Welcome to the Small Business Safari, where I help guide you to avoid those traps, pitfalls, and dangers that lurk when navigating the wild world of small business ownership. I'll share those gold nuggets of information and invite guests to help accelerate your ascent to that mountaintop of success. It's a jungle out there, and I want to help you traverse through the levels of owning your own business that can get you bogged down and distract you from hitting your own personal and professional goals. So strap in, adventure team, and let's take a ride through the safari and get you to the mountaintop. Alan, we're ready to get back at it. You're probably in your truck, guys. You're probably walking around, maybe doing a little walkabout. Hopefully you got good weather while you're listening to this one.
Did you say walkabout for our Australian friends?
I did. You like how I did that? And the reason I did is because I just got hit up by another Australian who has been listening to the podcast, and he's a tradie in the Australian market.
Look at you dropping the lingo.
He did, yeah. He's a plumber in Australia, listens to the show, and shout out, appreciate you doing that. Talked with another couple guys over the last 2 weeks who have listened to the show. Had a guest reach out to me and said, "Hey man, thanks again for having me on, because I've had two people in the industry, because he's our guy, Steve Lang, who was my supplier. And so the guy, or the industry that we're in, is home improvement. And I said, so they were guys who listen all the time. He go, as a matter of fact, yes, they do. And I said, they're here in Atlanta? He said, no, they're not. I said, oh, that's cool, man. So broad audience, kind of fun, had a great week. Just kind of getting out there and talking with some people, talking with the guy.
That Steve Lang episode was one where I didn't realize how good it was until I re-listened to it.
Yeah, it was.
A good guy. And then at the end, when you wrapped it up with all the stuff that he's done without any fanfare, he's not doing it for likes or anything. He's just doing really cool things for other people who need help. And it's not part of his business.
Yeah, I think that's the part that probably why he got that call, I think. Yeah. And so I just think that's cool. I mean, again, if you're listening, man, tell your friends, tell your family, get it out there, give everybody the word, man. The Small Business Safari, we're dropping dimes, bringing the heat. I just, again, can't say it enough. Enjoy doing this. Love getting together with Alan. Get a chance to expand our mind a little, Alan. Kind of, get into that Zen moment, kind of bring myself back to center, because I'm so good at that. I'm not a really emotional, excitable guy.
Did you see I'm wearing a pastel shirt just to try to calm you down?
I can't do it. Can't do it. We're going to see if this guy can, though. I think all time, one of the best names we've ever had on.
Yeah.
I mean, if you are rocking a name like Fleet Maull, you are definitely cool. Fleet, welcome to the show, man.
It's like a Star Wars.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
He was Fleet Maull before Star Wars, man.
I know.
All right, we gotta ask before we jump into what you do and how you do it. Great. How did you get the first name Fleet?
It's actually my grandfather's middle name, and his first name was Myron. So I've always been grateful that I got his middle name and not his first name, because Myron's a bit of an old-fashioned name. I'm not sure I ever would have got used to that. When I was young, Fleet, if you got something unusual about you when you're a kid, is put up your dukes, right? So it took a little while to get used to it, but I like it now, and it's a distinctive name. So yeah, it's great. But it's a family name, and it's not manufactured.
I love that.
I'll tell you a quick story. You mentioned Star Wars. Part of my backstory is I did time in prison, and I don't know if you guys are aware of that. We'll get into that, but yeah.
Well, you got me on that one. That was not in the profile that I read.
I've been out for quite a while. But shortly after I was out to the movies, and this was around that. I think it might have been Star Wars, and somebody talked about Darth Maul, first of all, from Star Wars, and then it was also when that controversy was going around the what was her name? Benet murders, a young girl.
John Benet Ramsey.
Yeah.
Atlanta.
And that just happened. And the friend of his who was getting investigated by the police ended up not being a person of interest in the end, I don't think, but his name was Fleet something. And so these people behind us in line thought they heard somebody call me by name, and they thought that's who I was.
Oh boy,
that's a little uncomfortable.
Woo! I tell you what, you dropped I mean, we're gonna hold that. We're not
or
coming
we can
back.
Just get right into it.
No, we're not. We're gonna hold on to the prison thing and we'll come back to it. So let's rewind a little bit. Why don't you tell everybody real quickly what you do and how you help people, and then we're going to dive back into the stories.
Yeah, so I have a company, Heart Mind Institute. We do big online summits and courses and coaching programs and in-person events and retreats, all kind of at the intersection of current neuroscience, positive psychology, and what we call ancestral wisdom, contemplative wisdom, all the science of both East and West from the contemplative traditions, mindfulness and meditation, the inner yogic traditions, all that science combined with cutting-edge current neuroscience and positive psychology. And we're helping people deal with their overwhelm and their anxiety, helping them rewire their brains for optimal performance and happiness and well-being, helping them heal trauma. And so it's kind of in that realm. We also do some summits in the psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy space because that has been offering so much promise for vets, especially healing from PTSD. And so that's kind of the general realm that we're in. I'm also uh, still, that's my for-profit company, Heart Mind, and we hit the Inc. 5000 list 2 years in a row. We're going to hit it again this August. We actually shrunk a bit last year, but our 3-year growth, which is what that's based on, will still get us on the list for a third time. And we shrunk a bit because AI is really having a major impact on the online education space, which we're pivoting around and figuring out, but it's something worth talking about. But then I also have a nonprofit I've been responsible for more than 30 years uh, that brings mindfulness and meditation into the whole criminal justice public safety space for the incarcerated, for at-risk incarcerated returning youth and adults, but also for the last almost 15 years, the correctional officers, the probation and parole officers, community police, other first responders. So that's another part of my life as well.
Wow. I tell you what, big words, big brain.
I
I mean,
know.
whew.
What does he do in his spare time?
I tell you, man, that was a download right there. Wow. Fleet, that obviously great work on the nonprofit. We'll touch on that in a little bit. I want to go back to the heart mind work, but I guess we got to go. So you started out as a young man.
He put it out there.
You brought it in, so we got to hit it. All right, man. How long? What'd you do time for? We know you weren't guilty. So what?
Yeah, no, I was guilty as hell, but I think I got more time than I deserved, but I was guilty as hell. I'm a baby boomer, and I came up through the counterculture. I graduated from high school in 1968, a very tumultuous year in U.S. history. The year of the Kennedy and King assassinations and the Kent State murders, and quite a just incredible amount of cultural and political tumult. And I was an angry young man due to alcoholism in my childhood, not my own alcoholism, but one of my parents. So, I merged into young adulthood with a big hole in my gut, angry, strong propensity towards addictive behaviors, and went headlong into the counterculture of the time, majored in drugs, sex, and rock and roll. And before I could figure all that out, I earned my way into a 14-year federal prison sentence or sabbatical. I'd always been a spiritual seeker as well. So by the time I got myself into prison, I'd been training in deep meditative traditions for a long time. I've been trained as a teacher, been really training pretty deeply for at least 10 years, been involved in it for 20 years. I'd also done a 3-year clinical training program as an integration of Buddhist and Western psychology and psychotherapies, and so I had that clinical training behind me. So I had a lot of training preparation before I landed in prison. So fortunately, I was able to do a lot with the time I spent there. It was a big, huge wake-up call for me. I knew what I'd been involved in. I'd left the country as an angry young man, became an expat living down in South America, and then fell into small-time drug smuggling, originally just being a source for other smugglers, and then doing some smuggling myself, just as a way to live outside the system, and I justified it with all this us versus them thinking. Before I could straighten all that out, I earned my way into that prison sentence. But I'd been a seeker for a long time, had a lot of training and preparation. So when I did get locked up, it was a huge wake-up call. My son was 9 years old at the time. Now he was going to grow up without a dad. I was originally sentenced to 30 years with no parole. So the paper next morning said I'd be 65. I was 35 then. I'd be 65 before I had any chance of release. And I thought that was the case for at least the first 6 months that I was in federal prison. I'd already spent 7 months in a county jail going through trial and sentencing, and then it took me about 6 months because they don't tell you anything. But I finally figured it out that because I was sentenced prior to 1987, um, and in fact, that was the reality back then. When I figured this out, it was still before 1987. I was sentenced under what they call the old law, where you got a lot of good time. I had a no parole sentence because of the statute I was convicted on, the so-called kingpin statute, the continuous criminal enterprise statute, which is like a criminal RICO statute, conspiracy, a very elaborate conspiracy statute, which actually there was one thing I didn't feel I was guilty of, which is why I went to court. Otherwise, I probably just would have, pled or put myself at the mercy of the court. But I didn't feel I was guilty of that, and that's the one that carried the no parole sentence, potentially up to life. I could have gotten life in prison, but I got 30, and but before 1987, there was parole. I had a non-parole sentence, but other people could get parole. But also, you got a lot of good time. So on a sentence, a long sentence beyond 10 years, you got 10 days a month statutory good time up front. So that gave you your statutory release date. You could lose that. They take it away in chunks if you're getting in trouble in prison. And then they also if you kept a job while you're in prison, you didn't have to do a good job, but if you just kept a job, you got 5 days a month that you earned as you go, extra, what they call extra good time. Sometimes they call it camp good time. And so once I figured all that out, I knew I would serve 18 and a half on the 30. And then it took my appeal about 2.5 years to go through the courts. And on my appeal, they knocked off one count. Should have given me a new trial, but it didn't. And so my aggregate sentence went from 30 down to 25. And then I knew I'd serve 14 and a half. And at that point, I probably still had about 12 to go. So it still looked like and felt like forever, but it was a lot better than 30. And that is what I ended up serving. I ended up serving 14 years in prison and then 6 months in a halfway house. And then the rest of the time, you serve under supervision. So I was under supervision and a lot of restrictions for another another 10 years or so. But yeah. So that was my prison thing. And I spent all that time in federal prison working on myself. I was a school teacher. It was my day job. So it was good professional experience training myself how to help really angry men learn to read or get their GED or study for college courses, and work with really angry men who didn't want to be in school, whose memories of school were a nightmare, but they were being forced to go to school, or they put them in a hole, so they're even more angry. And you live on the same units with them, so you don't want to piss people off because anybody can, you got to go sleep at night. You don't have locks on your cell doors, so the littlest guy in a joint can kill you very easily. So learning how to be skillful and be a school teacher and work with folks like that was really in-depth professional training for me. I led a meditation group because I was a trained meditation teacher, so I led a twice weekly meditation group for 14 years. I was very involved in my own recovery work from alcoholism and addiction, so I was very involved in AA and NA 12-step groups all that time. And then because I was at the U.S. Medical Center for Federal Prisoners, which is the maximum security hospital in the federal prison system in Springfield, Missouri, the patients all come from the high-level penitentiaries. And so this was the AIDS epidemic was just going into full swing in 1985. And so men were dying there of AIDS and cancer and liver disease under terrible, horrific, even I would say criminally negligent conditions. And we started the first hospice program in a prison anywhere in the world. Wow. And got outside professionals to come in and train prisoners like myself to be hospice volunteers. And I did that work on all my meal breaks and my free time in the evenings for the remaining 11 years of my sentence.
So the obvious question is, what formed you? No, I'm kidding. So clearly you get out. You're out now. Now you're a felon, and obviously work release. You can't go teach people. Can you? I mean, so what was your path coming out? What got you to where you are today?
Well, once I figured out the good time, and that I'd serve 14 if I stayed out of trouble. It's not easy to stay out of trouble in prison. Not easy at all. But I managed to, for the most part. And so I knew I'd be 50 when I got out. And it's not easy to start a life at 50, especially when you have a serious criminal record and you're in debt. The IRS had an assessment against me for about 300,000, and so, a pretty difficult way to start your life. And so, but I spent those 14 years training myself, and I knew I just really had to work hard and train myself. I wanted to really serve that community I was in and really make a difference. But I was also really training myself. I finished all the coursework for my PhD while I was in there, and I was just, really training myself how to bring value to life. And so when I got out, I had nothing. I've had nothing but opportunity ever since I got out in 1999. I was eventually able to travel, and I presented at the National American Psychiatric Conference, a big national conference for the field of psychiatry. I presented there in New Orleans just 6 months after I got out. So I very quickly elevated into a professional level. A lot of teaching. I got a job teaching at the same university where I got my master's degree in Colorado, Naropa University. They invited me to join faculty there, so I was on faculty there and teaching courses in Buddhist psychology and lots of different courses, meditation-related courses. But I started my business career right then. I mean, I grew up in a business-oriented family, small business. I elected not to make that my career path. My brother did. It was a Midwestern food manufacturing company that my great-grandfather started. Um, but I had that kind of in my bones probably. Um, but when I got out, I started a management consulting business. Originally, I was living in a halfway house, and I would walk to, or once I got a bicycle, I would bicycle to potential clients, hide my bicycle in the bushes, and walk in there wearing a suit with my briefcase and tell them why they should hire me as their management consultant. It took me 6 months to get my first client, but I negotiated a $5,000 a month retainer with my first client, and then I was off and running. So for the early period I was out, I was running the nonprofit that I'd started while I was in prison, Prison Dharma Network. I was teaching a lot at university, and I was developing this management consulting business.
But just amazing. Obviously, the resourcefulness when you get out. How about that, right? How many of us, when you think about being in small business, how many of us are willing to get on the bike, get over there? I mean, this is the imposter syndrome to the exact explanation. I am riding a bike. I have my suit on. I put my bike in the bushes and I go in and tell them, I can help you make your business better. And I sit there, you think about small business, but we always say fake it till you make it. We think about the imposter syndrome that we go through. That is, I think, the best image that will explain what the imposter syndrome probably is. But you had the resourcefulness, you had the background, you had the information there. You just had to have people willing to give you a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, my first client, I was going around doing free. I learned. I got trained in and learned a kind of strategic planning, creative planning process. It was very visual with storyboards and lots of stickies on the wall and stuff. And I learned how to do that. And so I was going around doing that for people for free, whoever would let me do something for them. I did stuff for the University of Colorado and the other university where I was teaching. And I did it for a number of businesses. But actually, the way I got my very first client, I put an ad in the Yellow Pages, and just a little, 2, 3 line ad. And somebody called me, and they told me that they were interviewing consultants they needed to create a business plan. They were baby boomers like myself. They had a company that was kind of killing them. They were wearing all the hats, and they wanted to grow it so they could either not have to wear all the hats and just do what they enjoyed doing and have a company they could thrive in, or they wanted to sell it. Either way, they didn't care, but they couldn't stay where they were. It was killing them. And so they asked me if I could do that. I said, of course I can do that. And I'd never done a business plan before. And but they interviewed 10 consultants and hired me for some reason, and I negotiated a $5,000 a month retainer, and I actually ended up running their business for them for about 6 months while they were in Europe at one point. But years later, they happened to. I think it was about a year after that. That engagement lasted a couple of years, and before that ended, I had 2 or 3 more clients, but. They came by my office and they saw on my bookshelf, they saw a whole bunch of books on business plans. And they said, was that the first business plan you ever did? And I just looked at it and said, oh, come on.
Nice.
Hey,
Yeah.
Fleet, I want to ask you a question. I want to go back to something that you said because I think this is going to be really important. Right now, here we are in 2026, and all we're hearing is the country is more divided than it's ever been. And then you just brought me back to my childhood, 1968, the assassinations, Vietnam War, Kent State shooting. Do you think the country's more divided than it's ever been? And what advice would you have to somebody listening who's one of those angry young men that you were back then?
Yeah, well, I think we're divided in a different way. I do think we're more divided and more polarized. And there, back then, it was a generational divide, right? It was a generational divide, but the culture itself wasn't that, Republican, Democrat, what your religion was. People didn't make such a big deal out of that. Um, and uh, and we were still governed from the middle, more or less, right? You always had the extremes on the fringe, right? But in the last decade or so, the middle has disappeared and the extremes have taken over, the extreme left and extreme right, and there's no conversation anymore. It's all extremely polarized, and social media has made its contribution to that. A lot of different factors, but I think our culture and our politics is more divisive and more polarized than it ever has been, to the extreme. Much more. Back then, it was a generation that was opting out of the system and angry about the system and feeling like the system was hypocritical, and then the system itself. But the mainstream political cultural system was nowhere near divided like it is today. It was a completely different world.
So, again, what advice would you have to that angry young man today?
Uh, get engaged, take that anger and channel it into something creative. I wish I had channeled my anger into more creative pursuits than doing drugs and becoming kind of an outlaw, living out as an expat, and ending up time in prison. In many ways, I mean, that was my formation, and on some level, I have no regrets. I have a lot of regrets over any harm that anybody experienced as a result of drugs that I had anything involved with. And I also have a lot of regrets over the impact it had on my son, who grew up with his dad being in prison. But other than that, in many ways, I don't have regrets. It was my journey. But the regrets I do have is, I could have done many more creative things a lot of creativity came out of that. My generation created the whole digital age, created the personal computer and everything that flowed out of that, right? And so, I could have put my creative energies into that, and many other things, right? So I would encourage somebody who's angry today, get help with your anger and fuel that energy into being creative. We've never been in a time when we have access to more powerful creative tools
Hmm.
and access to more knowledge across all disciplines from the entire world and from all cultures and from all time. It's just there at our fingertips. And, you're in our one way to look at how as human beings how we fall on two sides of a line here. We're either consumers or we're creators. Now, most of us are, even the creators, we're all consumers as well. But what's the dominant thing, right? The culture is trying to train us to be passive consumers, right? And so, don't become a passive consumer, become a creator. Become a creator, and just find what your juice is, find what your instincts are, find what your passion is. I mean, there isn't any little niche of human interest that couldn't be turned into a successful business today. And the pathway to self-empowerment and personal competency and really and personal wealth at whatever level today is entrepreneurship, and the barrier to entry has never been lower. Some people think, well, it's extremely competitive, and the fact that the barrier to entry is lower makes it more competitive. But there's so many wannabes that are playing around with it. If you're serious, you're going to rise to the top very quickly. So, and I don't say wannabes to be pejorative or disrespectful to people. I'm glad they're wannabes. But, for whatever reasons, it's a smaller subset of us who will really get in and do the work and do it right. So if you're angry, fuel that into some drive and go find out what any little thing you're passionate about, and learn how to excel at it using all the creative tools we have from AI, and create a business and get going. Add some value
Love
to
that.
life.
That's so
Turn
good.
your anger into passion and value.
Anger into passion. That's the gold nugget, huh? That's
Somebody is a
this
little
guy has
angry
the
once in a
anger.
while.
I'm an angry man. I don't think you talk about that. I think at all some levels, unless you have really made peace with things, I think we all have it. And it's interesting when you talk about the polarization and that the fringes have taken over the middle, is that it's very interesting when people get into those conversation on the fringes. And you're like, I actually knock it down and say, look, I don't have the time for that one, man. I'm trying to run a business, so let's go back over here and talk about something else. And I think a lot of times maybe either it's the mental candy that people like to chew and you get into those areas to not really address what they can do to become successful. And because that's
Well,
what I
really,
took away what you said, and
the
that
thing
is
is, it dominates the mainstream today. I mean, the place where real conversations happen is in the world of podcasting. And long form podcasting really is where there are people center left, center right who want to have real dialogue and real questions. But that's not what happening. That's not happening in either one of our political parties. It's not happening in Congress. It's not happening in the mainstream media, right? It's really only happens mostly in the world of podcasting where you have reasonable, intelligent, left to right, left of center folks that want to have real conversations, real dialogue, and they recognize that nobody's right all the time. None of us have all the answers, but we can find our way together, and that's where the best solutions are. Is the more diversity in ideas you can bring together among reasonable people who are willing to have real conversations, you're going to get to the best solutions.
100%.
But they got to be willing to have conversations and not just be, focused on blaming and shaming each other to death for they think that's their route to power.
Yeah, well said. And I know, Chris, you want to go, but I gotta ask, that first sale, you riding a bike, $5,000 a month, that's a life-changing thing. How did that feel? That first closed deal?
Yeah, it felt great. Uh, it's kind of I'd had money before, because I mean I didn't grow up with my family had a family business, but if people are old enough, I grew up in the suburbs, but kind of at the level of, just on the edge of working class, white collar, kind of Leave It to Beaver, Fathers Knows Best, that kind of suburban, those shows from the 1950s. So money was tight, stretch, everything was tight like that. My family did better later after I left home. They kind of moved more in towards the, I guess, upper middle class. But I didn't grow up in that world. And but then later on, involvement in smuggling. I wasn't trying to get rich, but I had money, and so $5,000 a month was less than I'd been making before I went to prison, but it was still it was no small thing. It was great, and it was it wasn't long before I got out of prison that I was actually making more money than before I went to prison. And I was doing it legally, because I was never making millions as a smuggler. I would do a run, make some money, and spend it, and live outside the country. And when it was almost gone, I'd go do it again, right? Or once I moved back to the States, I put myself through school. I would again, I'd once or twice a year I'd disappear, do that, make some money. When it was almost gone, I'd go do it again. So I wasn't really trying to get rich doing it. But in general, but it wasn't long before I was making more than that legally. And that was great because I didn't have to be looking over my shoulder anymore. I wasn't freaked out that the door was going to be broken down any moment of the day, right? So that was a huge relief to be able to be. I'd always been kind of entrepreneurial and self-supportive. I mean, I left home in college and never asked my parents for a dime or anything or got a dime from anybody. So I've been self-sufficient for a long time, but it was great to be self-sufficient legally and to be able to be relaxed and not worried about somebody breaking down my door.
So let's talk a little bit about now what you're doing today. And one of the things we didn't touch on yet, but you help people who kind of get unstuck or rethink or reimagine themselves. Maybe let's share maybe a tool or two that you use with people when you engage with them that people could kind of pick up on this podcast.
Yeah, well, I use a lot of self-awareness tools and the context of what I call radical responsibility, which is the name of my first major book. And radical responsibility was the philosophy I developed in prison. Really quickly when I got there, I realized that if I was going to have any hope of having any kind of life inside, survive inside, have any kind of a life with dignity, and have any hope for a life if I ever got out, if I survived, I was going to have to embrace like 1,000% for having got myself in there, what I was going to do with my time there. And there were a lot of people I could blame. I did a lot of people's time, but I just knew focusing on that was just a complete waste of time. And I also realized very quickly I was in a really corrosive, negative environment, and and everybody had a huge victim story. And if I didn't proactively do otherwise, I could end up just broken and bittered and angry and and full of all that kind of stuff. I didn't want to live that way in prison. Fortunately, I had a lot of contemplative training, a lot of psychological training, and I'd had a lot of good models and mentors, and so that's not who I wanted to be. So I realized I had to just embrace really 1,000. I got myself in here, and what am I going to do with it? Focusing on anything else was just going to be a waste of energy and waste of time. So, that's the philosophy I live by then and continue to live my life by, and that I try to help people around, is realizing the power in choice. And it's not that there aren't circumstances, right? And it's not that you can't attribute some causation of some circumstances we deal with to people and forces outside ourselves, but we can't control any of that. The only thing we have any real power over or even influence over is ourselves and our own choices, right? So that's where we want to focus our energy. Any other focus is just kind of an inefficient use of our energy when it comes down to it. So, I mean, when stuff happens, we may need to kvetch and complain for a moment, but, give it 30 seconds and then move on, right? I mean,
Sure.
horrible stuff happens to people, and for which they may need to have that really validated, right? And they may need a lot of support. But at some point, if they don't say, okay, this horrible thing happened to me, it shouldn't happen to anybody, but here it is, what am I going to do with it? At some point, that's the really salient question. Am I going to let this take me down and, develop a permanent victim mindset and identity? Or am I going to find the most creative way I can respond to this to move my own life forward, even in my own line self-interest? And if I do that with any kind of long-term view, that's usually in everybody else's interest as well. So there's that. That's the context. And then the how really has to do with developing deep self-awareness on how this machine runs, right? Understanding our own neurophysiology, our own biology, our own trauma, our own conditioning, and understanding how to transform that, developing the self-awareness to be able to live a choice. Because, we have conditioning and habitual patterns that have been running since our childhood, and they're still running until they're not. And for most of us, they still will rear their ugly head any time of day or night. So if we don't have the self-awareness around that, we won't have choice. We'll already be in the behavior and the result of the consequence before we even realize what's going on. So we have to have the presence of mind and develop the neural buffering in our system to recognize, okay, here I am. I feel that reaction. I see that pattern. I know where this could go. I'm going to make a different choice. I'm going to make a choice that's really in my own enlightened self-interest and probably in the interest of others. And that takes presence of mind to do that. It takes literally transforming your own neural architecture, your own nervous system. And there's a lot of tools to do that from the contemplative tradition. So I teach a very deeply embodied, neuroscientifically informed approach to meditation called neurosomatic mindfulness meditation, which helps people.
Is that one word?
That's one word, or it's a group of words. It helps people completely transform their own neurophysiology and their own neural architecture, literally rewire their brains so they can live consciously, live at choice, and optimize their own health and well-being and optimize their own success. But it's really getting in there and doing that work. So the tools I give people are the self-awareness, embodied self-awareness mind training tools. And then I also give people experiential um, practices, experiential opportunities that help them see the value in the philosophy of radical responsibility, see that that's not a burden, but it's actually where all their power is. So it's really the combination of those things, the context, and getting people to not just think that some should, but realize, oh my God, that's actually the doorway to freedom. The more radically I can take ownership for my own circumstances day in and day out, the ones I can see I had something to do with, but even the ones I can see I don't see I had anything to do with, I'm going to still take ownership over what I'm going to do with those, the choices I'm going to make, and then I'm going to train myself so I can really make choices instead of having, my childhood running my life. I mean, we all live at this interface between our childhood programming and the world around us. Now, if our childhood programming was completely benevolent and we lived in a bubble of benevolence, then maybe we could be in there somewhat mindlessly, somewhat mechanically, and things might work out okay. But for most of us, our childhoods were a mixed bag at best. And the world around us is certainly not a bubble of benevolence. And for mostly, we're just in there kind of getting shoved around in this intersection between the reactivity between our childhood programming and the world around us. So, but it doesn't have to be that way. We can take ownership for our own nervous system. We can take ownership for our own mind, our own neurophysiology, and we can, despite whatever challenges are going on, we can have the ability to stop, assess what's going on, and make a conscious, creative choice about what is the best way for me to respond to this rather than living a life of habitual mechanical reactivity, which is where we all live until we don't. And most of us are walking around thinking we're adults, free thinking adults, making free thinking adult decisions all day long. Be nice if it were true, but it's really not. Stimulus A1 comes in, we respond with response or reaction B2 every time. We're very highly programmed, very habitual, very reactive until we're not. So becoming conscious is really the human game. That's the game of human evolution, is becoming conscious.
So without giving away how the sausage is made, can you give an example of one or two of the tools that you help people rewire their brains this way?
Yeah. So really the way I approach mind training and meditative training and so forth is all about feeling the body. We've all been enculturated not to feel, right? Feel the slightest discomfort, take a pill, get some clothing, do something, eat some food, shift your attention, watch Chris and Alan on their podcast, anything, but don't feel, right? Just don't feel. And so we've all been enculturated that way, and to much our own detriment. We tend to live up here in our heads. We're very visually, auditorially oriented. We're very cognitive naturally. And so we lead these very disembodied lives. So it's about training ourselves to come back in the body and feel the body, because the body has all the wisdom we need. The body will teach us how to live our lives. Getting in the body physically, it's literally feeling physical sensation, like feeling the breath, not just feeling the idea of breath, but literally feeling all the micro sensations involved in a contraction and relaxation of the muscles that drive our breathing. Coming back into the body all the way down to our toes that way will retrain it'll reshape our neural architecture. It'll help us move in from intentional self-regulation, which most of us don't even do that. That would be a godsend. For most of us, the world is regulating our nervous system all day long. We have this autonomic nervous system that has two branches that go either rest and digest or up into stress and activation, fight or flight. And they're all happening all the time. And for most of us, that autonomic nervous system is being regulated by everybody but us, by the world around us. So you can learn breath work and different tools to regulate your own nervous system quite easily. But then if you really do the deep work, really get grounded deep in your body, it'll create this internal neural biofeedback loop where you'll auto-regulate, where you'll just naturally be in balance. You'll be naturally spacious. Your mind won't be cluttered. You'll be making good choices because you're in flow with life. But just to give you a really simple tool, there's a simple tools out there you can easily find it. Just put it into your search engine, straw breathing. So straw breathing, you breathe in through the nose with the mouth closed, and you breathe out through pursed lips like you're blowing through a straw. You can actually use a straw if you want, but you can just use it with pursed lips.
Whoops,
And
switch breathing.
and you breathe in a 4 count. So let's just do this together real quick, okay?
Let's go.
All right. So you're breathing in through the nose, out through pursed lips, and let's give an exhale together, and then we'll start breathing in. I'm going to count in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, into the nose, 2, 3, 4, out through pursed lips, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Just keep breathing like that. I encourage you to close your eyes for just a moment. Just feel into the body.
Not if you're driving. Not if you're driving. If you're
Yeah,
driving
not if
right
you're
now.
driving, but otherwise, close your eyes for a moment, feel into the body. And as you're doing this straw breathing, notice if you notice any physiological changes. Almost certainly within a minute or two, you'll notice yourself chilling out. You'll just notice yourself calming, slowing down, and chilling out. What's happening there, because you're emphasizing the out breath, and because you're blowing out through pursed lips, which requires more effort and creates a different gaseous exchange, creates more nitrous dioxide. It creates more carbon monoxide. I'm not carbon dioxide. So anyway, it's a combination of effects that move your nervous system into the rest and digest response, the relaxation response, the parasympathetic response. So that's a simple tool, straw breathing, that no matter how upregulated, stressed out, or angry you are, you stop and do straw breathing, you just
You're right. I tell you what, if
brings you right back down.
you guys listen to this, when he said your toes, if you wiggled your toes, you were listening. If you weren't, you weren't. Yeah, because I started wiggling my toes. He said, Fleet said, "Hey, what did you feel?" I said, "You know what? For me, I started feeling my fingers actually pulsing with the beat of my heart."
Yeah.
So you can get there, guys. We're
Yeah,
coming to the end
absolutely
of
get their
this.
basics. There's also box breathing, which they train the military in. And then there's 4-7-8 breathing, which is a variation on straw breathing. You can look these up very easily. These are simple tools that anybody can start to take charge of their own nervous system. And again, the world is divided, into creative and passive consumers. The world is divided into people who manage their own nervous system and people who don't.
Amazing. We're coming to the end of this, and I love the straw breathing. That was a great gold nugget for all of us. Go out there. The breathing techniques, I think.
I mean, I was kind of getting into it just after 3 of them.
Yeah, I was too. Again, if you're driving though, man, keep your eyes open.
Right,
Now,
right.
if you're driving in Atlanta,
You can do it
driving
with
in
your eyes
DC
open. You can train yourself to do it with your eyes open. I
Oh.
I used to be a road warrior before the pandemic and driving the airport 2, 3 times a week back and forth. A lot of bad weather, white knuckle drives, and I'm doing straw breathing the whole time. I stay relaxed. I get to the airport on time. I don't get triggered into any road rage. I go through security, stay relaxed the whole time, make my flight. I'm doing straw breathing the whole time.
Take that note, especially if you're in DC, you're in LA, you're in Texas, you're in Atlanta, eighth worst traffic in the nation, as I just found out this morning. And I had to drive in the middle of it for an hour and 15 minutes this morning. I needed to have the straw breathing techniques. Fleet, this has been great info. And I know you've got some great classes and great things that are coming up for entrepreneurs. Can you give everybody a place where we can go find all that as we start wrapping this guy up?
Yeah, so we have a summit called the Entrepreneurial Mastery Summit in the Age of AI, and we have some of the leading business minds and marketers on the planet there. Incredible people. Jack Canfield, who started the whole Chicken Soup for the Soul publishing
Wow.
empire. Dan Sullivan, a strategic coaching. People like Ryan Dice and Roland Frazier. Really, really incredible people. And we're going to have Jay Abraham live. If people are familiar with Jay, he's a legend in the world of business. And so that's going to be in July, and then we always do online so it'll be available in various forms going forward. But if people are able to join it in July, that'll be there. And then following that, we'll be launching a 3-month what we're calling Operator to CEO Accelerator training. It's a 3 months intensive training. We're going to help people develop the mindset of the CEO, learn how to use and discover the latest AI tools, really learn to understand marketing, learn to understand scaling, and learn how to start exit planning from the beginning of your business, even if you don't plan to sell it anytime soon, because you're going to build a better business that way. So we're going to teach all the practical tools of how to move out of the overwhelmed operator into a true CEO visionary who can build a company that will actually give you the freedom you got in business to achieve in the first place. So many people, want to leave the corporate world or leave the 40-hour week, punch in the clock job and start a business, and then they find out the business owns them, and they're completely overwhelmed and so forth. And they got in there for that freedom, and they never realized the freedom. Well, you have to learn how to not be a business operator and how to become a true CEO. And so that's what this training is. It's the Operator CEO Accelerator. And so that's going to follow this summit, the Entrepreneurial Mastery in the Age of AI Summit.
Beautiful. Fleet Maull. And then how can everybody reach out and find you?
Heartmind.co.
Heartmind.co. How cool is that?
Heartmind.co.
You knew it was going to be cool.
Co. Right.
You knew it was going to be
They can
so
also go
easy.
to fleetmaull.com, and if they're interested in my book, Radical Responsibility, they can go to radicalresponsibilitybook.com. But they can find it all by just starting at heartmind.co.
Love it. Heartmind.co, guys. This has been another great mind expanding episode where you start to really think. And you know what? Sometimes let's just call it like it is, man. You think you're at the bottom. You think you're down. You think you're out. Did you do 14 years in prison? You know what? I hate it when people say, well, it could always be worse. Screw you. It can always be worse. But you know what? It's how you take it. Take that radical responsibility, make that thing happen for you. Find a way, get yourself unstuck, keep moving up that top. We got to keep going up that mountaintop. Let's get to the success. We got to keep rocking. We're going to do this again. We'll do this again next week. Alan, we got to go. Fleet Maull, you rocked it today, baby. And I love it. He's got nothing. Darth Mulder got nothing on Fleet Maull. You got to go check him out. Alan, we got to go. Let's go make some money.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.